Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Historical Biography. Today we're going to be learning about Cesar Chavez, who is a labor leader from the southwestern United States and who really pushed the agricultural union movement in the United States. So let's get started talking about Cesar and all he accomplished. So who exactly was he? Well, he was an American labor leader and a civil rights activist, and he lived from 1927 to 1993. He was the founder of the National Farm Workers Association, basically the largest agricultural union in the country, and his worldview has been characterized as being a leftist with Catholic social teachings. So he is he's associated with the labor movement, which is definitely on the left. And he is of Mexican descent, so definitely has some Catholic leanings in there. He led several famous strikes in the southern United States to earn better working conditions and wages for farm workers. So back when he first started this movement, farm workers were treated notoriously poorly, and he kind of shed light on their condition and advocated for them to have better working conditions. So let's keep going with Cesar Chavez. His early activism began in 1953 when he was hired by the Community Service Organization to set up chapters of the organization in California. He traveled across California setting up chapters. However, they often fell apart after he left. So he would set up these chapters and then leave, and then they would disband shortly afterwards. During his time with the CSO, he would work to stop the practice of businesses hiring guest contract workers over Mexican-American workers who had to be paid more. So basically, he was advocating that people who were actually in America, who were under labor laws, should be hired instead of migratory farmers who could get paid less because they weren't actually supposed to be in the United States. He then went on to found the National Farm Workers Association. In 1962, he moved to Delano, California, and began organizing the NFWA, although he referred to it as a workers' movement because he did not want to specifically call it a union, because that would draw attention that he did not want at the time. The NFWA aided farm workers by securing insurance for them, a credit union so they could get the money they needed to survive, and organized strikes to improve working conditions for these farmers. The organization was originally run out of Chavez's house, but after a year, he was able to headquarters it in an abandoned church. And Chavez's success with the NFWA raised his profile and status among labor organizers in the U.S. So this was his first kind of major union and labor work, and it kind of raised his profile, making him a national figure instead of just a local figure. The thing that he's, I guess, most known for is the Delano Grape strike. And beginning in 1965 and lasting until 1970, Chavez and his organization organized the Delano Grape strike to protest for higher wages. The growers he protested against labeled him a communist, and he was then investigated by the FBI. So the people who he was opposing threw the communist word out there, and of course got the FBI on his tail. The strike would gain national attention and funding from other unions and activist groups like the United Automobiles Workers and the SNCC. And in 1966-67, the U.S. Senate had hearings on the migratory labor issue in the West, and Chavez marched from Delano to Sacramento to draw attention to the cause. So this was kind of his first major national thing that really put him in the mind's eye of the rest of the country, not just labor organizations. With the growing success of this strike, the NFWA was able to build 40 acres of land for their headquarters, and he hoped that this HQ would be kind of a spiritual center for workers and included amenities for members. Meanwhile, Chavez worried that his union members would turn to violence, which is something he opposed, so he spoke a lot about making sure that they maintained nonviolence in their strike. Chavez held a fast in 1968 that would last for 3 weeks, and the ending of his fast was attended by Senator Robert Kennedy, and it was that very year that Kennedy would be assassinated. So Chavez was able to attend his funeral as a pallbearer, so that was a pretty important honor that Chavez received. The strike eventually ended in 1970 following a boycott of the grocers that put pressure on the growers to capitulate. So they made their grape strike even more impactful by boycotting the grocers that were selling Delano grapes, and that made the growers have to capitulate because nobody was buying their product. After the Delano grape strike, Chavez went on to lead several other strikes, including the Solanas lettuce strike in 1970-71, and in 1972, Chavez would lead an effort to recall the governor of Arizona over his refusal to allow union activities for farm workers in his state. So he's getting out of California now and becoming more of a regional power in labor negotiations. Starting in 1973, Chavez would begin advocating for immigration reform. He launched several legislation campaigns. He believed that illegal immigrants were being used as strike breakers and undermining his union work. So this might actually seem kind of backwards when you look at it now, but at the time, what Chavez was doing was protecting his union work and the American citizens that he was representing, and so he wished there to be reform to the system, which I think did eventually happen. Where you could get visas to come work instead. In 1976, Chavez and his union publicly backed Proposition 14, which would secure farm workers' rights in the California Constitution. However, it was defeated heavily 2-1. So the people who he was fighting against in this issue had the money to make sure that they did not succeed there. Later on in life, Chavez faced growing resentment from other union members over the handling of its healthcare plan in several strikes, and the union was split over several legal actions that Chavez had took in an effort to remain in control of the union. Despite being a great negotiator and figurehead, Chavez was kind of a control freak in that sense. He wanted to be in full control over what was happening. He also became involved in the Chicano lobby and turned the union towards commercial activity to raise funds for the union because people were not joining as much as they had in the past. So let's talk a little bit about Chavez's legacy. It's kind of hard to characterize. He's a polarizing figure, but during his lifetime, his decisions and actions were often polarizing, even amongst his own supporters. And you could say the same thing about other leaders of that time period, like MLK and Malcolm X. Despite this, he did accomplish a lot of things he set out to do, and has been kind of made into a folk hero, with many supporters kind of worshiping, almost like a demagogue, or he has kind of like a cult of personality around him. Many of his former allies turned enemies viewed him as a poor administrator. So they didn't say that he was not ineffective, but they said he wasn't very good at the administrative part of what he was trying to do, which is a fair criticism based on how a lot of his things worked out. Thank you so much for watching and learning a little bit about Cesar Chavez, one of the great labor organizers of United States history. Go ahead and subscribe to learn more, and go ahead and drop a comment on our video with someone you want to learn about, and we can work to make sure that we make a video about them as well. Thanks again for watching, and we can't wait to see you again in Historical Biography. Thanks.